Welcome to today's China Future Tech webinar. I'm your host, Zhou Xing, and today's topic is Inside the Nexperia Crisis, the future of chip supply chain. We're very happy to have Xiaofei Xu, our political economy reporter who is based in Paris. Xiaofei will share on-the-ground reporting on how this crisis has been covered in Europe. And Coco Feng, our senior tech reporter who is based in Guangzhou. After recently visiting the Dongguan factory, Coco will provide vital insights into the Chinese perspective. So let's start from the first question. Of course, last night we have the news that the Netherlands government has shown some goodwill by suspend the Goods Availability Act, which some is reading as giving back the control of Nexperia to China. But of course, we also see MOFCOM saying this is not enough. This is a good step, but this is definitely not the results that China would like to have. So, Xiaofei, please tell us a little bit more, what China wants and what Dutch can give and what's the gap.
I think from yesterday's separate announcements, it's very clear what China wants and what the Dutch wants, right? China said suspending it is good, but we want the order, first of all, to be revoked.
Yeah.
Because now it's a suspension and you don't know when it might come back in force and stuff. And then China said, we want the Netherlands to address another key concern of theirs is that, where the Dutch commercial courts, it's called the Enterprise Enterprise Chamber, we want you to do something about that ruling that removed Zhang Xuezheng as the CEO of Nexperia. Mm-hmm. And then this is maybe me personally speaking, but considering how mad China was when the Dutch caretaker economic minister, I think that is also something very key to remember. Mm-hmm. He's not an acting minister, he's part of a caretaker government that usually is not supposed to make significant decisions, right? So when he spoke to the Guardian and said that if time went back, I would have done it all again, and China was very mad about that. Yeah. I think China also want to hear something from their side, admitting that maybe they mismanaged the situation, right? They disrespected China's investors, they disrespected China in general, and then what the Netherlands wants, they've been clear with it since day one, I think. They want to keep Nexperia in the Netherlands. They want to keep Nexperia's production capacity in the Netherlands. When I was in Netherlands, when I was speaking to local officials, when I was speaking to industry sources, they kept pointing that out to me, being like, first of all, they all kind of thought that this got blown way out of proportion. Nobody wanted for this to be like a middle finger to China. It was like, no, we still very much want to do business with China, but they put their emphasis on the illegal activity, or if you should say alleged illegal activity that the former CEO Zhang Xuezheng did, that was vindicated by the court ruling, which was removing financial resources and production capacities away from Nexperia Netherlands back to China. That for them was their key concern, people on the ground. And then, interesting enough, they told me that they didn't quite understand why the Dutch minister mentioned IP and technology. Okay. Because they were like, well, this is not high-tech chips.
Exactly,
it's
legacy
chips.
Production.
It's legacy chips. It's like, they were like, Chinese manufacturer can pretty much do the same. So that for them was not a key concern. For them, there was really this urgency that, had the courts allowed Zhang Xuezheng to continue what he was doing, Nexperia Netherlands would collapse. Okay. And then, per the Dutch economic minister, Vincent Kiermans, that would bring a disruption to the supply chain, which is why he chose to enact this law that no one has used since 1952.
The Cold War law, yes.
Yes.
But Coco, from China's perspective, I mean, Wintech spent $4 billion US, whatever the amount of the money to buy 100% ownership of Nexperia. And of course, it should be like in control of, because I buy it. I buy the company, the business should be mine. So I have the rights to deal with it, right? And also, what I exactly, China side want? They really want to install Zhang Xuezhen reinstall Zhang Xuezhen as the CEO and having, the China full control of Nexperia BV. I mean, not only China but also the whole corporate structure.
Okay, what we tell from the government's statement yesterday was they are happier than last week, but they are not satisfied enough. I think what they wanted is a full review of the court ruling back in early October, where they ousted both Zhang as the CEO, and also they kind of took all the voting rights of WinTech away, and that's quite that's more important than just revoking the Cold War era Act. And also they wanted an attitude, a statement from the Dutch government about why you did it at the first place.
So they want an apology, basically.
We can say that. Yes. And also from Nexperia's China's perspective, I think the two sides are in very deep rift now, and they are arguing at each other. So you don't pay me, I don't pay you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is basically they're just decoupling from each other. I think from Nexperia China, there is a lot more to do. The company is not operating as one company anymore, and they need to mend these rifts. They need to, rebuild the trust and reconstruct the global supply chain that takes even longer time.
Okay, that's very good. Shafi just mentioned, the next step may be because the government order is suspended, but maybe the next step is to go to the enterprise chamber, ask them to review. To escalate it to even higher courts to review the enterprise chamber's decision. How likely, if WinTech go to Netherlands and to send a petition to the Supreme Court of Dutch, how likely is a senior court is going to revoke the decision of the enterprise chamber?
It's possible that the Dutch Supreme Court, well, first let's say that the enterprise chamber's decision in the Dutch legal system is a final decision. There's no
it's final.
There's no what we consider to be an appeal to an upper court
where
there will be a retrial, right? The only thing that WinTech can do is to go to the Dutch Supreme Court and ask for a review of the procedure of how the Dutch Enterprise Chamber arrived at their conclusion, and eventually, if possible, what they could get is a cassation, which means that the Dutch Supreme Court would say, because I want to make this clear that it's not going to be a retrial anyway, because the Supreme Court is not going to look at the evidence again. The Supreme Court is not going to call extra witnesses or whatever. They will only look at the technicality of how this Dutch business courts did their whole trial, right? If they found a, say, serious procedural error, or if they found what they see as a wrong interpretation of a law, they could say, well, this is wrong. And we'll send it back to you for reconsideration.
Based on the history record, how's the possibility? How big is the probability?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because this year in January, there is a similar case where it was between two companies, I think Dutch or something. The enterprise chamber made the decision that one company was suing someone was suing someone else for mismanagement because the corporate structure was not nice. There was someone taking out multiple functions all at once, and then that's wrong. Basically, the enterprise chamber said that nothing was wrong. The enterprise chamber rejected their claim, citing insufficient evidence. These people brought this to the Dutch Supreme Court. And the Dutch Supreme Court did say, after reviewing how they got to that conclusion, said you failed to consider sufficiently Their argument that once you have one person taking multiple functions, for example, at a company, it harms the company's structure, it harms its output, and then it sent it back.
Okay.
And I assume the Dutch Enterprise Chamber is reconsidering it. But again, as you could tell, this is we're talking about technicalities here. And it took a while. So the decision from the Dutch Enterprise Chamber regarding this case was made in October of 2023.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court made its decision in this January.
So it's 2 years already.
Yeah.
Okay. So Coco, there's a very likely scenario, as you said, is going to be like two Nexperia. One Nexperia BV, it's headquartered in New Zealand, and then have the European fabs, and then possibly the Asian factories, the packaging factories, and then one in China with main operations, basically some sales offices in major cities, and then the factory in Dongguan. Will that be the most likely case?
It will carry on like this for a while, but we don't hope it is the end game for this incident. I think both sides, they kind of revealed their willingness to act independently. Yesterday from Nexperia Dutch office, they stated that they are trying to boost the capacity elsewhere outside China. And also Nexperia China, they previously said that, okay, we are trying to find alternatives of the wafer supply. And obviously they have the ability to operate independently, but this is not what WinTech would like to see. For WinTech, it obviously want it to still operate as one company, the smoothly operated global supply chain as before, because WinTech, it has bet so much on this Nexperia. It was a smartphone contractor maker before, but it sold almost all its consumer electronics business. And for example, the third quarter, the semiconductor business means Nexperia, it contributed 97% of its third quarter revenue. So it relies on this business. It doesn't want it to fall apart.
Okay, but it's very unlikely, like Zhang Xuezhen gets back his CEO and get into the boardroom and fire everyone, and bring all his close friends to fill in the positions, and then say, this is I'm the master here, I control this company. This is unlikely to happen, it seems, right?
We will see how the Supreme Court says.
So, Shafi, from your perspective, is that still a possibility? I mean, they can have the Chinese management get into New Zealand and say, everyone, stand up, leave the room.
I think it's quite clear. I think it's clear to everybody that, as we say, the good old times or the good naive times of, a Dutch company is allowed to be owned by a Dutch company thinks that it will be safe from, say, U.S. pressure or from geopolitical tension, even though it's owned by a Chinese company. I think that time has passed. Okay. And I think this whole saga conveys it very clearly, that right? Because even before, the reason why Zhang Xuezhen, part of the reason why, as I was talking to analysts and people, what they told me was that what Nexperia was trying to do, or what the Dutch government was trying to create for Nexperia, is a framework where even though WinTech will remain as the owner, they won't have the full say. Okay. That will allow the Dutch government to then go to the US and be like, well, look at, this is a Dutch company, a proper Dutch company, so please keep it off your sanction list. But then, as you were saying, some Dutch analysts agree with me. It's like, why would the Chinese company sign up to this?
Exactly.
They paid for it.
Yeah.
And then they paid for it legally, right? Back then, Nexperia was struggling, and then honestly, from how I understood, WinTech was kind of the only company that was willing to take it on. And then it was approved by the Dutch government, but of course back then the Dutch government didn't have a strict screening process for foreign direct investment, but it was done legally. And now suddenly you're like, well, because now I'm starting to care about my national security, and then Trump is in Washington. Could we please negotiate something where while you keep your own you keep your own ownership, and then I have the final say? Why would anyone sign up to that?
Very good point. And actually, I read Coco your story over the weekend about the history of the Dongguan factory. It's also fascinating, right? When the Dongguan factory was set up, it's still the year 2000. Before China's entry into WTO, but China has already signed the MOU with the United States. So by that time, everyone knows China will be a WTO member. So in the coming years, and at that time, foreign investors pulling into China, and China just rolled out red carpets because at that time it was still Philips, and this is one of like the star project, and China supported the factories, and of course the factories business boomed for all the years. According to even their own documents, the factory has never actually stopped operation for the last 25 years. It's always 365 days a year, and 7 days, and 7 days a week, even during the COVID time. But now this is Coco, you have been there a few times. Tell a bit more about this factory. Yeah.
I went to there 3 times over the past month. I think why we care so much about the factory in Dongguan is because it accounts for 70% of the Nexperia's global output, and every automaker is waiting for its chips to arrive at the production lines. This factory, as you said, it was there for 25 years. When Nexperia was still part of NXP, when you search it on the map, you can find it under NXP name as till now. It is a very big facility in that small suburb in eastern part of Dongguan City. Dongguan City, to give you an idea, it's very famous for electronics production. It is home to smartphone brands like Oppo and Vivo, and Huawei also has a research hub there. It looks like a small town in Europe. Nexperia's China plant is not as big as Oppo or Vivo, but it's the biggest within probably 20 kilometers radius. And the workers there, it's actually the highest paid job around that neighborhood.
Yeah.
They could make like roughly 6,000, 7,000 yuan per month.
That's about $1,000, which is quite a decent.
It's more than the average monthly income for the local Dongguan resident. It has a size of around 11 football fields. It's very big, and there's 2 big production buildings and 6 other dorm buildings beside it.
How are the workers these days? Are they still like relatively young people? Because if I search on Chinese social media, still people saying this is one of the best places to go if you're a migrant worker.
Oh, really?
There's a European standard company. They take care of their workers. Dormitory situations, have bathrooms, and the monthly pay is always on time. These kind of things. Yeah.
Yes. You can see young people there, and also like middle-aged people who seem to work there for more than 10 years.
Okay.
Over the 3 times I went there, the sentiment on the ground evolved from a little bit upset in the beginning because the workers were concerned about this geopolitical tension would maybe impact their job. And also they were forced to take longer mandatory leave at that time, last month, till they kind of growingly became more peaceful because they know, okay, the Chinese government is behind us, and this is going to be resolved in some way. And also starting from the second time in late October, we started to hear from workers that part of the production lines were stopped. The machines were stopped. It rarely stopped because it takes a lot of efforts to restart it. And the third time, November 12th, we still hear from workers that the part of the machines, around 1/3, were idled. We could see the Dongguan factory has been disrupted for more than 3 weeks.
Okay. But Nexperia, China is trying very, very hard to tell their employees and tell their clients that the stable supply can be guaranteed, with or without the wafers from Nexperia BV, right?
That's right. I think another reason why they cannot supply their chips to foreign clients is because of Beijing's export control, right?
But
It's
that's
not
relaxed
only,
after the Trump
that's
Xi
right,
meeting
but
in
that's right.
South
But they are
Korea.
just slowly resuming now.
Okay.
So there are two factors that kind of disrupted that production.
So it's from the corporate level, we can see like one company is becoming two companies. But from another geopolitical perspective, it also shows, Shafia, from Europe, it also seems Europe is quite weakened or squeezed between this kind of China-US technology rivalry, because it started from the BIS export, the so-called 50% subsidiary rule, and it still seems like the Europeans basically have no say in this whole big picture. Tell us a little bit more about like how this is affecting the mentalities among the European governments and even the general public.
Right, like you were saying, it's not, the US is not officially part of this, but you can see the US everywhere. Right? It started with this US, again, if we go all the way back, some analysts would say that part of the reason why maybe Zhang Xuezheng started to transfer capacities out is because WingTech was put on the sanction list. And WingTech was probably trying to, and then with the framework, everything, the Dutch government was trying to come up with a framework because it wanted to keep Nexperia off the US sanction list. So the US sanction list is at the core of this. And then, of course, the Dutch minister said there was an urgency, and then he said it was pure coincidence that he made the decision. I think less than 24 hours after the US announced the 50% rule. And when you speak to analysts, no one buys it, right? It's like there's no way that that it is a pure coincidence. Like this, the fact that the US was announcing the 50% rule definitely played into your decision making. And then it was kind of, well, not solved, but tensions were eased. People suddenly had hope after she met with Trump. And again, like Europe was nowhere to be found. This is something that kind of was not caused by Europe. And it didn't really get solved by Europe, but then Europe lost the most in the whole thing because it was the European automakers who were struggling. I was in contact with people in Germany who were like, yeah, we don't know. We are trying. We're really working on a day-to-day mentality here. We don't know how much we will have. I think that just showed, I think mainly 2 points. Point one is that Europe, it got reaffirmed, right? This idea that Europe is kind of powerless when they got caught up in a fight between the US and China. The Dutch minister said himself in his interview with The Guardian that, this Nexperia whole Nexperia saga should be a wake-up call for Europe. And I feel bad saying this, but since Trump arrived in the White House in January, there had been maybe 150 wake-up calls for Europe already. This is not the first one, and it's not going to be the last. It's not going to be the last one. Like I live in Paris. I can still remember up until today, French people hate the trade deal that Europe signed with the US. They see it as a unequal treaty. And Politico had this great article that came out several months back. Is Europe ready for its century of humiliation?
Oh my goodness!
Like China, right? Because us in China, we understand how it started with a unequal treaty signed between the UK and China, and then you do have that. I think there have been widespread anxiety coming both from the US and from China, right? Because Europe suddenly realized that it cannot trust the US and it cannot trust China either. China could just say that I'm not going to export this to you. China could put a stop on rare earth, and then Europe suddenly realizes that there's nothing much that it can do.
Now my follow-up question would be this, because if you look at the whole picture, I mean the US, as you said, it's powerful. It has a market, and it has all the cars. It can have tariffs, export control, all these kind of things. And China is now also getting its own strengths, rare earths, the mineral exports. And China can play with this long arm rule as well, export controls, etc. So what costs does Europe have? Even like we cut costs for 150 times. And they try saying, maybe we should have some say in this supply chain, but apparently it did not.
Europe has, the biggest card that Europe has is when you talk to analysts, I think they will all agree, and I think the EU kind of agrees as well. Their biggest strength is their consumer market.
Okay.
Right, we want to sell stuff. Chinese companies still very much want to sell their products in Europe, which is why Europe are introducing tariffs. Europe has been doing anti-dumping, anti-subsidy investigations into Chinese products,
including the law.
Yes,
lawn
including the robotic lawnmowers that we broke the story yesterday, and I think the EU came out with this thing like an hour after our story ran. But the issue with the EU that you see right now is that it cannot close its markets completely. Because, say the US, when the US decided to kick Huawei out, it's gone. Within, it's gone.
Yeah.
Now no one can buy anything. Can Europe do that? It would be difficult, right? Because Europe remains a 27 member states. And then when you have 27 brains, it's difficult to make a decision like that. And countries will have their own thoughts. When France, who has been since day one being like, we need to set up tariffs, free trade is dead. I was in Paris, the ex-French finance minister who said it. Free trade is dead. It's killed by US and China.
That's possibly a good point from the France point of view.
Right. But then you have Germany, who still relies pretty much on the US, on China, on foreign markets to make money. And the former French finance minister, he admitted when he was still finance minister, and then the French and German ministers meet each year to talk about priorities and stuff. And he was like, we had an agreement with the Germans. No. We were discussing with the Germans, remarking there was no, because for Germany, the idea had always been that we open up our markets in exchange for the other side to open up their markets. And even today, when you talk to German automakers who have seen the impressive rise of Chinese EV makers and their arrival in Europe, right?
Yeah.
They would tell you that we're not. This is
not a fair trade. This is not a fair trade. Yeah, this is exactly I want to ask Coco about, because from Germany point of view, like, we open the market to you guys and you should open your market. But for China's strategic pursuit, it seems like we want to sell our products to the whole world. But on the other hand, we have to have this technological independence. We don't have to rely on US European technology. So Coco, if China wants to develop this, China will have this auto chip supply chain. Now, can China actually develop a full kind of supply chain based upon the Nexperia factory in Dongguan?
I think auto chip is different from smartphone chip. It hasn't to be very, very small, because the cars are very big enough to install large chips. So for China, so we talk about legacy chip here. If we want to look at the automotive chips, it's normally 28 nanometers and above. It's not very hard to make. China has several companies that are able to make these kind of automotive chips used for like power switch, things like, and telecommunications and this and that.
Yeah.
If we look at the chip, the manufacturing process involves you make wafers. That's like a little round little piece, and you like cut them into small dies, and you stack them together to make integrated circuits. So in this Nexperia case, the company puts wafer fabrication in Europe and supply it to the China factory. And what disrupts the production was that they suspended the wafer supply in the first place. But there are several companies that are able to make these wafers, but it will take 6 to 12 months for Nexperia's automaker clients to validate the quality of that wafer supply. It's not impossible. It just takes time. Like last week, our story names 4 companies.
Oh yeah. Now
That's
the U.S. China committee is now trying to say maybe we should have targeted these 4 new suppliers.
Yeah, that's very politicized. I think we're just talking about the possibility or the capability of supplying the wafer. Doesn't mean that they are working with Nexperia. But the most likely is that I kind of understand why the Dutch government is very concerned, because Wintech, it has a sister company in Shanghai that runs a 12-inch wafer factory that's exactly does what Nexperia EU does in Germany and the UK. And
but from a business perspective, from an economic, pure commercial perspective, if all the clients are, say, based in China, and if it's cheaper to make or more efficient to make in China, then the factory should be based in China instead of like the whole thing across the whole globe, right?
Yeah, I think normally, and this is also a cautionary tale for all the chip makers, because most of them also adopt this model of design and develop in Europe or elsewhere, and assembled and tested in China. This is a very typical model. And they used to prioritize costs and efficiency over other things, and now they find that this is disrupting our resilience now. But the cost of them relocating or diversifying that supply chain would mean higher cost and slower time to market. So you have to, if you want to, make things safer, you have to cost more. This is the balance that they have to think about.
Okay, this is possibly the biggest implications from the whole Nexperia saga. And I mean, Xiaofei, is there, they are thinking in, is this something that worry the European general public, thinking about like, we can no longer allow our businesses to be controlled by Chinese owners. We have to keep them local so that we have full control.
European public, probably not, but European politicians, yes. Okay. When you talk to everyday people, I think that holds true wherever you go, right? What people really care about is the everyday stuff. How much I'm paying for my grocery? Am I paying too much for electricity? Am I getting paid more and more? Or am I paying less and less? Can I find a job? That kind of, and then of course in Europe now, immigration always plays into it's either the top 1 or one of the top 3s, right? But politicians, yes. Okay. Politicians pretty much like to talk about this. And I think there is following up on what you were saying, right? This saga really showed both sides that the other side cannot be trusted, right? It's not only Europe. And then because when Europe cares more and more about its security, either supply chain or national security or whatever, right? Like Coco was saying, before people were prioritizing cost, efficiency, globalized times. Yeah. However we could make more money, let's go ahead. But right now, in Europe at least, I think in China too, right? People are thinking about, well, we have to think about risks, geopolitical tension, and of course, from a European point of view, China's stance on Ukraine makes China increasingly a national security risk.
Okay, good enough.
And then, so these are things that, as we've been saying, are not going to change suddenly. So I think, as you're saying, you will see more and more European politicians emphasizing autonomy. And of course, they would say, this is autonomy both from the US and from China. But I think it's fair to say that it's easier to criticize China than to criticize the U.S. from a European point of view, because on defense they're so dependent on U.S. supports, and then with Ukraine going on, So I think going forward we're going to see a lot more of this happening, because as you were saying, implications, there were many Chinese-owned assets in Europe. In so-called critical infrastructures or critical industries that were bought legally before Europe introduced a screening process for foreign direct investment. So how China and the Netherlands and the EU, and the EU solve this case will be observed by everybody.
Yeah.
And it will help them to decide how they would do it. For example, if it's under US pressure, what will you do? We were talking about this before, like the US government is now, the US ambassador to Greece was now saying, well, you guys own, 67% of this port near Athens.
Yep.
We don't like it. You should do something about it.
But actually the port was struggling before it was sold.
Yes. This port, I have to say, I'm probably going to do something about this later after I go back to Europe. This port is a good example of why China was able to buy so many assets in Europe.
Yeah.
Greece was struggling with that.
Yeah.
The Europe set up of course Europe bailed out Greece, right? And then Europe set up a committee to help Greece kind of reorganize its assets and to austerity measures and all that. Europe forced Greece to sell these ports.
Yeah.
And the Chinese company, the state-owned Chinese company, was the only company to submit a bid.
Yeah. And also, that thing also have impact on China's mindset, because China usually like business is business and go out buy things. By now, there will be more and more considerations. Like even if you put money down, you have on the paper you have 100% ownership. Like you still have to care about other legal and even like NGOs, all these kind of stakeholders. You have to look after their concerns and their interest. Will this also have a big impact on the kind of risk mind of Chinese companies, Chinese businesses when they investing abroad?
Of course. I think when China and U.S. Relationships went a little bit sour, they like to look for the European market, right? The European market is the most important market now. If a Chinese company has difficulty expanding in the U.S. We actually, after this Nexperia saga happened, if we look at China's stock exchange board, we could see shareholders of other Chinese companies, which are in the process or have bought any assets in the U.S. In Europe. The shareholders, they kind of
asking questions
about, okay, can you answer me if your assets is safe enough? Would it be seized by the local company? Can you guarantee, this is a stable operation, this and that? There are a lot of questions like that. I think the Chinese stock market and also the business world is very concerned about this case.
Cool. So even Nexperia, the saga can be solved. I think the word left in front of us will be more of mistrust and fragmentation.
I think so.
Okay. And that brings us to the end of today's discussion. Thank you for watching. See you next time.